Afternoon. The Transportation Committee meeting will now begin. We have Alderman Savage to my right, Alderwoman Rhonda Padilla Charles to my left, and myself. So we're all accounted and present. I'll take a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda's approved. We have minutes from 6/22/23. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes approved. First item on our agenda is Transportation Board updates, and Mr. Regal said he wasn't sure he could make it today, so it doesn't look like anybody came in his place. Is that correct? Great. We'll skip that.
I think did he have any questions we needed to address today?
Yes. Did you get a copy of those?
Yeah, just bringing them up.
Here we go. He wanted to address that we have, the Transportation Board has 4 vacancies. He had a question about the status of the city resolution urging Maryland Senate to pass the bicycle sidewalk legislation, and that is in the works, correct? Cindy? It is in the works. It's a resolution that I forwarded to you a couple weeks ago. It's in the queue. Okay. There's a question about the Transportation Board's recommendation to the city that the city provide EV parking signage, and there was a discussion between myself, City Manager Mike Malinoff, and Public Works, and those are in the line to be printed and should be posted probably within the next 3 weeks. Question about that?
Yeah, could I ask maybe Transportation Director a question about the, if you don't mind, about the EV parking signage? Does your department deal with enforcement of EV parking spaces in the city? Like for example, those in front of, well, I'm not sure which ones the board's talking about. Are they talking about public spots at like the rec center?
Yes.
Parking garage, or are they talking about other facilities?
Yeah, a combination of both. Marcus Moore, Director of Transportation and Parking. Yeah, we did have a call earlier this week about improved EV parking signs for our facilities, which means the garages, surface lot, and in front of Pitt Moyer. Signs have been ordered. It was a good thought of less than 3 weeks. I would think we'd have them in 2 weeks or so. In answer to enforcement, whichever parking contractor, depending what district we're in, SP or premium, will enforce. The new signs will talk about duration of time. What the code says, I believe, is 12.020.090B. That talks about what the fine will be, which is $100 for violators. We're toying around with maximum of 4 or 5 hours, or must be plugged in. I have to go look at the clip art again, what was decided. Most jurisdictions will say no more than 4 hours or 2 hours, because even if you're plugged in and it's green, you should be moving. So we thought 4 hours for someone that's there for an 8-hour day, they can come move it at lunchtime or something of that nature. But several signs have been made to replace what we have, to talk about what the punitive damage is for violators.
So you said premium or
SP.
SP Plus will be in charge. What if it's out at like the rec center?
That is still controlled by SP.
Okay.
If they get a call from someone, of Rosalind Johnson's staff or anyone else that there's someone violating, because that's a real good point. I wondered that too, in talking to them that this week about it. If we get a call, that's not someplace they regularly, routinely inspect, but if they get a call, they would. And as a backup, because obviously they're not there 24 hours a day, if it's observed by APD, they can as well.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. And then the last one was the pending Transportation Board recommendation to the city and state that the new Chesapeake Bay Bridge include a safe and separated pedestrian bicycle path. And I answered that with, I wanted more information because I hadn't seen that come from them to us.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's our business either.
It's not our business anymore because the bridge is not in the city. Okay. So we'll follow up on those as well. Is there any more questions about the Transportation Board update? Great. Next up on our agenda is Annapolis Ahead 2040. Eric, you want to bring your team and introduce yourself?
Sure. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. I'll introduce the team, but we're going to provide an update on the BIRD micromobility program as well. I don't know if that was a separate agenda item, but we got data from BIRD, our operator, that we can share. So, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Casey Ortiz is our comprehensive planner. We work heavily with Brian Callahan from the mayor's office on transportation projects, and then Elad Nichols Kaufman is a summer intern from St. John's College who's been assisting. So just dive right in. We'll do the BIRD update first. It's just a handful of slides. We have a new account representative with BIRD that started just a couple weeks ago. We got notified, and we've met that person virtually, but they could not be at today's meeting, so they provided information to share with you all.
Is his mic on?
Speaking of the mic, okay.
Thank you.
I should know this by now. Just for anybody watching at home, BIRD is our selected contractor to operate the micromobility program, which means the e-scooters and e-bikes that are found around town that are accessible for anybody to use, provided you have an account with BIRD. And they're a leading provider working all over the country. They had worked with a number of smaller communities with historic districts. That was one of the appeals of working with them, among other companies. They had a great track record, and we've been very happy with their service. Feel free to chime in anywhere. The primary reason for this kind of program is that we have gaps in our transportation network that a service like this could provide. It's often called the first mile, last mile. Say you get off the bus and you still have a walk to your home or work or school or other service. Just shorter distances. These types of vehicles have been extremely useful. We can get data on the commuters that use them during rush hour, and it's just the system's been heavily used. I should say we also instituted it when the Hillman Garage was out of commission, and so it was intended to be both to augment ways of getting in around downtown and avoiding having to drive downtown. But it's been a useful service citywide. I'll show you a few maps in a second that explain. There's a community pricing program that BIRD offers that is a great resource for anybody on a lower fixed income, a senior, or U.S. veteran. Pell Grant recipient, students, nonprofit employees, city employees, county employees are all eligible for a 50% discount, which is a great reduction. And I would encourage anybody to take advantage, anybody that qualifies to take advantage of this program. So we last gave an update in January on the program, and so we gathered the data since then between mid-January and today. And what you can see here is pretty dramatic increase once we get into the warm weather months. If you look down the rides column, you see the number of rides that increase starting in April, and then really jump up in May. And then that's pretty consistent trend when you look at rides per scooter distance. And so July, we're actually only part of the way in, third of the way into the month. So those numbers are a bit lower than what they'll end up being by the end of the month. But distance traveled, average distance, I mean, all of these are very much seasonal trends that are pretty consistent everywhere. And the rides per user, I'm sorry, actually it's the next slide, I wanted to say something. Yeah.
Can we take a question?
Yeah, one quick question. PROW?
Oh, yeah. Public right-of-way. So basically, this is something we learned in the beginnings of the program. We initially started with 100 vehicles, 50 scooters, 50 e-bikes. And when we looked at the data for average number of scooters in the public right-of-way, we were seeing it was hard for the company to get close to 100 regularly because they take some off the street to charge. So there's always going to be less than the total number that they're allowed. And so we increased the program twice. We went to 125 initially. I think that was related to the boat show, where we expected a high number of visitors that weren't going to be driving into downtown. And then we're still having a hard time getting to, we wanted to have 100 vehicles on the street at any time of the day. And so we upped it to 150, and you can see we're getting closer to having around 100 on the street at any one time, and when we have 150 in circulation, so to speak. So that's the idea.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then the snapshot, just as kind of a weekly trend, you could see Saturdays, big day, most popular day to ride these vehicles, although we do get a lot during the weekdays. And average ride distance, it's that first mile, last mile. Again, this is why people use them generally. They don't go longer distances in general. And then the duration is just more about the distance, that minutes. These maps are probably the most interesting, I think, because, so I have blowups on the next page, but on the left, the blue dots are where the rides are starting from. And this has a lot to do with where the company is locating them at the beginning of the day. They go out and they place them in certain locations around town. And there's been initially, most of them were in the downtown area and Inner West Street. We had a lot at Park Place because that's where city staff were parking, and you have people who are doing jury duty or going to the court park there. And so that was a big hub. But you could see when you zoom in, they're starting a lot more beyond the downtown, really all over the city. And this was a specific request that we made to Bird many months ago to start to expand the where these vehicles will be located in the morning, so people could expect to use them to get to downtown. So, there's a lot of jobs in downtown that people are, we felt that if you put too many in the downtown area to start the day, you're really serving more of a tourism ridership. But if you start expanding where those are located along Forest Drive and Eastport, Parole area, West Annapolis, then you can start to reach more people that might be going into downtown. And so that's been a very deliberate effort. And I think that the pattern is showing. You can see where they're ending up. all over the city. It's still, large concentrations in downtown and Eastport, but you can see them starting to get out into Anne Arundel County and the Parole area, by the mall and off Bestgate Road. And that is actually because Anne Arundel County has a new agreement with Bird. So they've extended the contract to Anne Arundel County. It's a separate contract, but it's essentially the same operator. So this is actually, I think, redundant with what we just shared. It has the commuter rides. Sorry, this is a little out of, I wanted to go to, but let me just, the expansion in Anne Arundel County started this past May. It was probably a year in the making. The county had been discussing it for a while, and they wanted to just roll it out in the right way. And so they started when we did the Bike to Work Week event at City Dock. The county executive made an announcement, and so they're actually enabling people to use the scooters outside of the city limits, both south of Annapolis and north into the town center, the Annapolis Mall area. So if somebody's using the app today and they look at the service area, it's essentially the whole Annapolis Neck Peninsula at this point.
Tanya Asman is the county's bike coordinator, and she was on our RFP team.
That's right.
When we looked at, was it 6 or 7 companies that we chose Bird from, and so once they saw how it was going with us, they really liked it and wanted to bring it into the county, which is good. I think of a lot of your constituents who work at the mall or the hospital will find it really convenient to be able to get to work. We also introduced, I happen to know the manager at the mall, so I set up a meeting with Tanya, and he's really excited because he knows a lot of his staff live in the city, and he wants them to not have to wait for the buses or have to take cabs. So they're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I have a question about the end and the distribution of them. And I see a lot, especially around the stadium in Emerald Heights, where it's an end point. So they're dropping it off, and then it sits there for 2 or 3 days. I'm calling every other day to say, this bike's been here for 48 hours. The scooter's been here. Because I literally walk every day, so I'm seeing it. I make note of them. Is there a way in the process that we can be assured that those bikes they're not being picked up again and taken in another direction? They're coming there, they're stopping until me or somebody else calls. So is there...
If there are locations where you're seeing a pattern that they're just not being used by somebody else, we should let Bird know that those are some like hot spots, I'd say. There is this, generally there's a philosophy that, you want to leave them for 2-3 days max. That's give somebody a chance to, find it, use it. What they've told us is that they have a software that they use to manage the fleet where they get prioritized based on how long they've been idle in certain locations. And that kind of tells them which vehicles need to be picked up sooner than others. So that it's almost like they get a bounty on them that makes them more important to get off the street, and I've noticed, sometimes vehicles do fall between the cracks in terms of for whatever reason, they don't pick them up when they should. And so we do notify them when that happens. I think we should definitely let them know if there's a certain place like that, the stadium loop, maybe, if you've seen that trend, we should let them know that. But
yeah, it would be great if the bikes and scooters could have the phone number or the hotline to call to say, because I have it in my phone, but not everybody does. And, you're out walking and you see a bike. It would be nice if there was a number on there that says, if you see this bike and it's been here for X number of time, call this number.
So they do have that.
It's not apparent.
Okay.
I looked for it the other day
Really?
because I didn't have my phone on me.
Okay.
And I was like,
That, I will make sure that they understand that. Because I agree, you shouldn't have to necessarily be using the app to be able to, notify them. They set up a email that we frequently use. It's annapolis311@bird.co. I should have a slide on that, but annapolis311@bird.co, and that's an email that goes to their whole team. The operator that's on the street picking up the vehicles, also their account representative in the office, and a few others. And so it's intended to prioritize things for them. But
thank you.
yeah. That's the extent of the bird presentation. I was going to move into the Annapolis Ahead 2040, if that's
Yeah.
okay.
One last question.
Sure.
When we last had the report in the wintertime, there had been no reportable accidents. Is that still the case? Do you know?
Yeah, they don't have any to share with us. I don't know if that's, they say they don't keep track of that stuff. I don't know if that's accurate, but yeah. I think maybe the next time we do this, we could involve APD and, they might have some data on this, but I have not talked to them about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, Annapolis Ahead 2040 was released June 15th at the Planning Committee, the draft of this comprehensive plan. It's our 10-year comprehensive plan. We started this process about 3 years ago, before COVID, and then during COVID, and got through COVID, and forced us to pivot the process. But I'm really excited to share the draft plan. There's a dedicated website at AnnapolisAhead2040.com where residents and anybody else can access it and review it and see the various sections that it's broken into. A table of contents here includes transportation as one of the core chapters of the plan. We're in the middle of a 90-day public comment period, so there's a variety of ways folks can comment on the plan. We're doing in-person meetings, so we have 3 more. There was the first one at Pitt Moyer last night. We have one at the Eastport Annapolis Neck Library tonight. We have one on Monday night at the Mount Olive Community Life Center in Parole. And then we have our 4th one next Tuesday at the Bush Library on West Street. They're all from 6 to 8 p.m., open house style events, so folks can drop in at any time and talk to staff. We're providing all of the goals and recommended actions printed big so folks can read them and leave comments and just get clarity on any issue that they think is not addressed. But the Planning Commission at every one of their meetings every 2 weeks is also keeping the public hearing on this open through September. And at that point, the idea is that the comprehensive plan is handed off to the City Council, which would do a adoption process, and there may be recommendations that come from the Planning Commission. And at that point, City Council will probably have their own, you all will have your own suggestions that would perhaps change the comprehensive plan. So that's the process that's guided by the state. The state of Maryland provides in the land use code the process. But transportation is really...
Excuse me.
Yeah.
May I ask a question about that? If you go back a second.
Sure.
Few things, like I know, first of all, it might be a unique situation, but the department is going to be getting a new director within, 60 days or so. Mm-hmm. So it might be worthwhile waiting until the director comes on as far as before getting something to the council. I imagine a new director would want to have some influence over this as it really guides not just city council, but planning commission and the department.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. To add to the uniqueness of the situation, our incoming director actually worked on this plan. So it's,
That's right.
he's been very involved. He's somebody who's been very involved in planning in Annapolis for many years. So in some ways, I mean, I think we're in a better situation. You're absolutely right, though. I mean, if I was coming into that role, I would want to have more of a voice in that plan. But he's been engaged and has, I think, his imprint on this already. But he'll have probably some new opinions.
Suggestion, you might want to check first.
Yeah.
The other comment, I guess, would be the intention of the appendices that are listed. I know they're not all attached, and it looks like there's a mixture of city and, or some of these state or county or other.
So they're all linked on the website. If folks go to the AnnapolisAhead2040.com website, that first takes you to the city's website where there's a button that says to read the comprehensive plan. Click, and that takes you to our new website, and everything is broken out by chapter. If you scroll down, there's a box that says appendix, and you click on that. There's hyperlinks to all of these documents. Most of them are city documents. There is the one at the bottom, the 2020 analysis of impediments to fair housing choice in the Baltimore region. That was done for a group of jurisdictions around Baltimore, so including Annapolis and Anne Arundel County and a few others. Several of these are task force reports that were city council task forces, but it's really just that last one that would be not
Okay.
solely a city
I
document.
guess my one comment on this would be, especially for the city documents, I think they should only be included if they've been officially adopted by the city council. So I bring this up because the Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study Task Force report was not adopted by the council, and I don't think it should be included in the comp plan,
So
even as an appendix.
I completely agree. I think one thing we need to clarify here, and we actually got this comment last night at our Pitt Moyer event. There's some confusion about this. What we're linking is the report that came from the task force that was appointed to review that Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study document and make changes, enhancements, and so we don't use that Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study as it wasn't adopted, it wasn't completed. That's not a document that we in planning and zoning use, but the task force report is like a 20-page document that our understanding from the resolution that created that task force, and we actually asked Alderman Arnett about this because we thought that it had to be adopted, the report coming from the task force, but it appears that the resolution that created the task force simply says that they should submit their final report, and it's then complete, and it's sort of, I don't know that the word adopted is used in the resolution, but it's sort of implied. But we're open to, I mean, I think what will be valuable is certainly clarifying which of these have been adopted. And
Well, yeah, as I know in particular, I don't know exactly the process for the sector studies, but
yeah,
I know that did come to the council for approval, and we ended up not approving it. And so I think any inclusion in this comp plan would imply, I think, to future readers that, oh, this is something the council agreed to and reflects our policy direction, when it would not. And there, I think you're right as far as there are differences with task force. Sometimes we just want the reports. And
okay, point taken. We can definitely make note of that.
Oh. One more question? Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Lashinsky, Ward 3 was also involved in that Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study Task Force. For purposes of Monday night's meeting, you can leave it in for us, because I'd like for the residents to at least take a look at it and know that it exists. So, I mean, if you want to take it out for other community meetings, fine, but I'd prefer for Ward 3 that you're leaving in.
Okay, we haven't really, the meeting last night at Pip Moyer was our first of these in-person meetings. We haven't really been bringing all those documents. It's so much information to bring to people, it's hard to not overwhelm folks that come. So we've really been focusing more on just what's in the comprehensive plan and not the appendices, but we want to list them just so people know we're kind of looking at these documents as for insight, but we could certainly have copies of that task force report available there.
Right, because they were very involved in it. The other thing is too, because we talked about the Upper West Street sector study back in 2016, and that was a lot of work that was done in Ward 3 with that. So we definitely want that included at the meeting, and we discussed that, and you agreed. That's extremely important because there were some things in there that were extremely important to the residents. And so I'd like for that to stay somewhere in, maybe not necessarily in this final report, but somewhere that we had worked on this subject matter and that it was important to Ward 3.
Okay.
That was a 3-day, all-day charrette, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I
We spent a lot of
before I was
time.
here, but I
Many hours.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an excellent plan, the Upper West Street sector study. And I would really love to have it be adopted, if at all possible.
I don't think it could get to the adoption stage, but there were a lot of pieces of it that we really were pleased with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, got it. So getting into the transportation content, I first want to share that, the first page of the comp plan talks about equity, health, and resilience as these underlying themes of the plan, and transportation meets all of these. I think the way we design ways of getting around our mobility network, they need to address each of these themes to be successful. And I'll explain what that means. I mean, at a very basic level, we can design a city that makes us healthy, and we can design a city that makes us less healthy, and we really want to design a city that makes us more healthy. And that, a lot of that is based on our transportation network. So we plug transportation into a section of the comp plan called the functional city. We look at transportation broadly. Our transportation network can be used for getting around or for other things, such as pickleball. This is a glimpse of our Inner West Street corridor on a dining under the stars evening. Transportation, dollar for dollar, is one of the best investments we can make in the city. And I wanted to share this quote almost in orange here. Almost no matter what you want to do with cities, transportation is the fastest and most cost-effective way to achieving your goals. If you want to reduce CO2 emissions, if you want to advance social equity, if you want to foster small business success, if you want to increase land value, if you want to increase public health, if you want to reduce the fatalities and injuries, transport is the place to do it. Coming from the chief of San Francisco's Transit Authority, we agree that, the transportation system we have today in Annapolis is very one-dimensional. You really, you need a car to get around the city effectively, to get where you need to go. And in the next 20 years, we'd like to see a city where you do not need a personal vehicle to be successful in the city. That's really the fundamental takeaway from this chapter. We see streets as vehicles for prosperity, both in terms of health, but also businesses that, their success from having a beautiful streetscape in front. This is a glimpse of Inner West Street. The city invested a lot of time and money to making Inner West Street a more attractive and functional street, and it's led to a lot more investment along that corridor. Our streets are conduits for emergency evacuation, freight movement, and the character of the city, to name a few aspects. Safety is really a guiding influence over a lot of what we're proposing in this chapter. I mean, it is a trend nationally that pedestrian and cyclist deaths and serious injuries are on the rise. And same is true here in Annapolis. The right, you can see the map of where these hotspots are in the city, safety-wise. They're predominantly on our highest volume corridors, Forest Drive, West Street, Bay Ridge Avenue, Chinkopin, the Main Street, downtown. So it's clear where we can improve safety and investments into our roadway corridors. We put a lot of emphasis on active transportation, this plan, which means getting around without a car, biking, walking, active modes. This is primarily because we're just not building a lot of new roads in the city. We are a city that is mostly built out. We have an existing roadway network that we're trying to improve. And so making it so people can get around safely and easily without a car is one of the best ways of reducing traffic congestion, improving our environment, many other benefits. And so that's a big emphasis here. We talk about, yeah.
Sorry, Mayor. Just on that active transportation, for my constituents, I need to mention, I support and I love the increase in active transportation, but seniors are not mentioned. And then they in particular, I mean, some of them for sure will bike and walk, but I think that should be acknowledged in here, in this this particular section somehow. And maybe there are alternatives you have in mind that you could throw out there for them.
That's an excellent comment. We have received that comment from at least one other resident already, and it's well taken. And I would acknowledge that the senior population is our fastest growing demographic in the city. So we can certainly look at ways to augment the narrative. And the complete streets concept is something that many cities and counties across the country are adopting, not in a one-size-fits-all way, but the basic idea is that how can we design our streets so they're safe and comfortable for all types of users, whether you're driving or walking or biking or taking transit. And we want to do in the coming years a guideline for complete streets that's appropriate to Annapolis. County, Anne Arundel County adopted a complete streets vision or ordinance a few years ago. We can't just follow them because the county is very different landscape than the city. We want to do something specific to the city. We know we're constrained on a lot of our streets. We can't do the perfect thing ever, really. We're always sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul. This community gets a great sidewalk. This one, there's utilities in the way. It's a very challenging environment, no question. But there are many improvements we can make. This image on the bottom is at Chesapeake Avenue at Burnside Street, where the lane width was narrowed and basically improved crossing for pedestrians was created. So it's just one example. But
Madam Chair.
yes,
Coming on that too. I'd also suggest, because I didn't see this mentioned in here, and again, I entirely agree with the goal of moving towards complete streets, but once we get to that point, as far as getting people more engaged in active transportation, but also in the multimodal, non-automobile modes, I think that'll require a review of some of. You mentioned parking requirements, but I don't believe I saw that you mentioned the street side parking. So I'm thinking West Street in particular, right? If we do succeed as far as getting people out of their cars, building more facilities, if they want to, for example, structure parking, why not remove a whole side of on-street parking and put in a structured bike lane, for example, right? But that's not really, I didn't see that mentioned here as far as a potential strategy or a component of complete streets.
because it's very case by case. I mean, it's hard to fully articulate the struggle that we have with, and Brian can relate to this. I mean, almost every place where we're trying to improve bike facilities, we come into a situation where there's street parking that some people will say is desperately needed and others will say is never needed. And we try to do an analysis on what's really the story here. And so it's very case by case, but that is definitely one of the usual trade-offs. And for example, I mean, the Public Works Department does traffic studies whenever there's a concern about safety on a roadway. And we're looking at the one for Tyler Avenue, the stretch from Hilltop to Forest Drive. People are driving way beyond the speed limit on that, and there's a lot of things we can do there, but that would be a great corridor for a protected bike lanes. We don't have the roadway width. There's some things we can do today to improve safety without the bike lanes, but it's primarily because there's parking desired, and yeah.
There's currently parking on both sides of the street on Tyler where that study was done. And another study that we've been doing is to look from the Eastport Bridge all the way to Quiet Waters. And a lot of Bay Ridge has parking on both sides. So, our dream is to move parking to just one side, the side that then the parked cars are the protection for the bike lane, bike ped path. And that way it does do some traffic calming, narrows this street a little bit. And we think that will solve a lot of accidents that are happening, especially on Tyler. They're hitting parked cars,
Yeah.
But I think you're right that we could certainly acknowledge that is, as we move forward, we're going to continue having to make these hard decisions, I think, and that's just going to be, it's a just kind of a necessary challenge.
It is the case by case, but Tyler's different because people have, I think, greater. In some ways, I know there are some parts that have issues with parking shortage perceived, but that also moves the point of, well, do we want to look towards placing a fee of anything over 2 cars, and then on Inner West Street, it's a different story too, where you could close one side to all parking and put in a bike lane, but the other side could be more drop-off pickup, shuttle drop-off pickup, special event parking. Anyway.
Yeah, I do think that we're going to have to stop treating it as a sacred piece of the streetscape, in the future. That's the way it's been treated, I think, in most of the city. But we do update the bike network recommendations in the plan, building off of the 2011 bike master plan. That was the city's first citywide bike plan. Many of those recommendations are still very valid. Some aren't, we've learned, but we updated that, and we have in red are the priority corridors that some of them exist today, and it's just a matter of making them better. Like Hilltop Lane is one of our first striped bike lanes in the city, but it's still very unsafe and uncomfortable for a lot of people. Can't ride with a small child on Hilltop Lane because people drive very fast. So we talk a lot about the future of Hilltop being one where there's protection, a barrier separating cars from cyclists. And, so you have cyclists going in 2 directions on one side of the street, and we have adequate width there to do that. So separating cars from bikes is definitely the future treatment, I think, in a lot of places where we have the space. For safety purposes. We have a number of major trail initiatives that we try to distill and summarize here. The West East Express, the College Creek Connector, Forest Drive Trail, which is essentially extending the existing path in front of the Safeway all the way down to the Peninsula Park and Quiet Waters Park. Hilltop Lane Connector is a short segment connecting Hilltop to Forest Drive. And then Bay Ridge Avenue Bikeway is what Brian mentioned, connecting downtown to Quiet Waters Park. So we're trying to advance all of these major initiatives, and there's more funding than ever before outside of the city, which is a good thing, from the state and federal governments. The map here on the upper right is important to just put us in context that Annapolis is part of this larger Anne Arundel County trail loop that includes the B&A Trail, which was completed like 30 years ago. You can essentially get to Baltimore without going on a street. Except in Annapolis, we are a gap in this network. The county is advancing two major trail initiatives that will benefit the city. One is called the South Shore Trail, which is a former rail line like the B&A. It follows General's Highway for the most part. And then the Broadneck Trail will go out connect the B&A Trail to Sandy Point. So those are major initiatives that we're going to be connected to, but we're trying to fill in the gap within the city. Most of these big projects are part of that. We did a pretty intensive assessment of our pedestrian network, and this is, Casey did a lot of work on this. We used a tool that was developed by our Regional Planning Association that was looking at how to better acknowledge where the gaps are, using highly precise data that we can now capture using new technologies. And we were sort of the guinea pig for this tool, but it allows us to really see where we have major gaps in our pedestrian network. You can see Ward 2, Ward 3, there's quite a bit there. And there's scattered other gaps throughout, but we want to use these to really focus our investments in the CIP. And we did, this is actually from a different chapter, from the community facilities chapter. We looked at the zones around all of our schools. The purple represents like a 5-minute walk to a school. And we overlaid that to see where our bike trail recommendations or our bikeway recommendations are. We could just as easily do that for the sidewalks, but it basically says, well, those are maybe places where we should prioritize sidewalk and bike lane recommendations or investments. And we are I'd say our current CIP does that. The Cedar Park is a big project. We have a missing link on Spa Road that's close to Annapolis Middle and St. Martin's School and the Primrose School that's under construction. So, and there's probably a few others in the CIP that are going to benefit the school populations, but just one way to prioritize. There's a lot on electric mobility in this chapter. It came up earlier in this meeting. There's so many ways in which we can improve mobility through electric vehicles, not just the transit fleet, but other vehicles. But the transit system is definitely a big emphasis. And, you can see the image of Annapolis Go here, which is ending soon, but we have a plan to expand on-demand service by Annapolis Transit. And, so I think we've learned a lot from Annapolis Go, and we've learned a lot from our downtown shuttle that was not electric, but in terms of public transit, there's a lot of opportunities, I think, to expand use, and a lot of it is through frequent service, different modes. We actually we reach a lot of people with our transit system today. This image on the upper left, this green map shows in dark green every part of the city that's within a short walk of transit. So it's not that we're not covering the city, it's just, how do we get more riders to be interested in transit? How does it go to the right places? So I think, that's something we're going to be looking at in the future. I think we could do that analysis, that sort of reimagining of what transit should be.
Eric,
Yeah.
just quick on that. I mean, I agree with you as far as needing to look at where it goes, but I do need to point out that the entire peninsula of my ward is left out currently. I know Mr. Moore is working on it. The other thing is, you mentioned in here that transit's not considered a viable option by many in the city. And what are your thoughts as far as what's driving that?
Yeah, it's a bit more anecdotal and just based on the data we have that, it's, I think that there's, in recent years, there's been a lot of thinking about how to make it more attractive, functional. I mean, I think that the thinking about how to expand use of the downtown shuttle, a lot of the ideas that went into that are applicable to the broader transit system, but where it's very clear where it goes, it's serving a very specific demographic or route. It's frequent service. It's I think
you could get into that a little more in here as far as, because I think part of the problem which you allude to is where the system goes, the transit system goes. And you mentioned it earlier as far as, and I think various members on the council said this before, as far as the transit system has seemed to be more oriented on taking people to employment centers as opposed to just taking people downtown. And so I think there are different, people use the transit in different ways. Just like it seems like some of the micro transit's more oriented on downtown. And maybe that's more appropriate for that mode of transportation, I don't know. But it really, like you kind of said, depends on where people want to go as far as whether or not they deem it a viable option. Like in my ward, the buses are not, if we want to get downtown, because we have to walk to the Giant just to get it, and then we have to, which can be, a mile and a half, 2 miles for some people. And then if we do that, we have to take a transfer down at the Eastport Shopping Center just to get downtown.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the routes could be, depending on your purpose, could be made more viable. Right.
I think we saw that with the Annapolis Go and the microtransit, how popular it became, and we didn't get an actual end report of data, but the number of people that are disappointed that it's ending in a couple of days, I think also, and a lot of them are coming from your ward or from the outskirts. West Annapolis, I've had a whole slew of constituents complaining about it stopping. So I think that that's probably the direction that we need to be moving in.
Yeah. Yeah, we were trying not to get too deep into actual details of the route system. Yeah, obviously, we want to work with Marcus and Transportation Department on analyzing that finer detail. But something like, we can talk with Annapolis Transit and try to understand if there's some way of describing kind of the model that we've been working on, and whether there's a different philosophy kind of in the future about that, how to serve the residents better. Regional transit is something that we have not really advanced much in recent years. It definitely took a hit during COVID. Many of our bus lines to Baltimore and DC were scaled back. There remains a hope that Annapolis will be better connected to our major cities in the next 10 to 20 years. We've been a footnote, I would say, in regional plans that identify the priorities. This map here is actually from the most recent MDOT regional transit plan, and the light blue lines that you could see connecting from Annapolis on the lower right are the long-term priorities. They're not priority. They're long-term recommendations, which would be, higher frequency bus rapid transit or rail to Baltimore and to DC. But, we're certainly advocating to work with our regional partners to expedite these projects. I think with Anne Arundel County, we have a real opportunity to do that. They are thinking very much along the same lines. They've been really trying to expand transit in the county and improve service. And so the best thing we can do is continue to operate at the regional level and work with our partners there and just advocate for connecting Annapolis better. But the plans all identify the goals, the plans done by the county, by the state, by regional planning entities. So it's not, we're in some ways just sharing those here and acknowledging that we want to keep advancing them. But the Bay Bridge is a big opportunity. This is, I think this is the last slide. You know, it's obviously outside of the city limits, but has huge implications for the city. We benefit from this being located near Annapolis, but we also are challenged by it because of traffic. But the benefits are huge. I mean, it's economic, it's tourism. A lot of people come through Annapolis. Sometimes they stop, but the opportunity to have a crossing that is pedestrian and bike oriented, that allows this bridge to be more than just the fastest way across the bay by a car, the opportunity to have transit, have a dedicated lane. I think that how this crossing will be designed will have a great impact on how transit and other modes of transportation are treated in this area. So there's a lot riding on this project. You know, the city really should advocate for a design that is very multimodal, meaning not just oriented to personal vehicles. The ferry service is also a big part of that. There used to be a ferry from Sandy Point, where Sandy Point State Park is. We're obviously working on various ferry travel initiatives in the city locally, and Visit Annapolis and Anne Arundel has their own study of a regional cross-bay initiative. So the city has a lot at stake, a lot to gain from these types of initiatives, and we just have to keep advancing them. But that's the extent of the overview. So.
Thank you. It's appreciated. Any questions?
Yes, I have a request. You're coming out to Mount Olive on Monday, and I'm listening to your presentation, and I remember going back to the 3-day charrette, and you indicated for Monday you planned on basically having everything available and people can talk and discuss. But for my ward, I think it works best if you give a presentation, maybe for 30 minutes. You'll be there from 6 to 8, maybe starting at 6:30. 6 o'clock, people will have an opportunity to kind of look at everything. And then the presentation at maybe 6:30 to 7:15-ish. And then people will have questions. I think that format works really well in Ward 3. So if that's not too much trouble.
No, it's not. We're happy to do that.
Great, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
And I will put that out today when I put out what you sent me, the flyer that you sent me, so that'll work extremely well.
Okay, thanks for the
Okay.
tip.
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so going on to the, some of the policies, the goals,
Yeah.
I wanted to get into that a little bit because that's really where the meat and potatoes is. All the text is just fluff.
Yeah, I should have acknowledged that. You're right that the goals and actions are really where the meat, but I wanted to just kind of go through the content that informs those goals and actions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we want to have a part 2 at some point, but I think it's worth getting into some of these policies because, and just one quick comment on transportation goal T1. Yeah, because I think, and I'll send this to you, my comments, but you know, I think some of the goals could benefit from getting reworded. You're working a lot of ideas into them, and I know apparently I'm on a kick this week for wordsmithing, but I'm doing it because I've witnessed over my, 20-some years in government that things do hinge, policies, code, they hinge on single words sometimes. Law cases, legal cases, implementation can hinge on a single word and something reflecting the true intent. And so this is going to be used for the next 15 years or so by councils, by planning commissions, by staff to guide. So I really think it's important to be clear. And so as far as that first goal, I'll send you some of the changes for it. But I think a goal, because the way you word it is to shift the mix of mobility investments toward public transit, micromobility, ride sharing, active transportation, and support for telework options to double the usage of these modes by 2040. A lot in there. And you mentioned teleworking, but that's not mentioned at all in any of the actual recommended actions. And I think the goal really, and again, I'm trying to see if I can get at the intentions you're trying to relay in this. The goal is not simply shifting investments to those options you've listed. I think the goal should be in line with the actual alternatives that you're suggesting. So something more broadly about the goal would be expanding and improving non-automobile multimodal transportation options and increasing their usage, right? That also gives you a lot more things you can put in there for performance measures, because right now the only performance measure you have in there is looking at the investment dollars. But I don't think your goal isn't just getting more dollars. The goal is actually getting the change, right? The mobility change towards those non-automobile methods. Other comment on this section would be, you included in here the fare-free, implement a no-fare pilot program for public transit to encourage more ridership and test its feasibility. I mean, my first reaction was, well, the council already rejected that idea, and including it in this kind of skirts around us. I think you could still get to the same point by just saying, again, the goal isn't even necessarily getting to ride fare free. It might be for some, but I think really the goal is to, what you stated before, is encouraging more ridership and making it more viable, right? And so I think, fare free, I suppose, might be one way to get there, but I think there are multiple ways to get to that goal.
I just want to say, I guess my understanding of the fare-free proposal was not that the principle was off, but just the way it was being presented, and that if there was a more viable funding source so that was kind of the intent. But
no, that's true. Yeah, So I think that'd be good to maybe work in that, to mention specifically something that has a more viable or sustainable fiscal support for a pilot, and that might be a good opportunity to partner with some organizations. On the next goal, talking about build a policy environment in Annapolis that is mode neutral, equitable, oriented to safety, prioritizes connectivity of the city's streets, sidewalks, and trails. I think, that's the first time I saw you use mode neutral in the plan. You usually just focus on multimodal and getting people out of their automobiles. And, instead of introducing a new phrase and word, it might be better to just, the goal is to build an approach that focuses on prioritizing, improving the safety of and connectivity of the city's multimodal transportation. So I'm trying to look for some of the larger comments I had. Oh, so for complete streets, which you mentioned earlier, and I thought about mentioning this earlier, but you have your recommended action in T2.1 is to adopt a complete street policy, but it's only for every public and private development project. And I think the problem with that is that that's really only part of the picture. We really don't have all that much new development relatively. So I think what the goal, the recommended action should be include creating some kind of program that's going to be looking at retrofitting existing roadways. Even if there's no development, the city should incorporate some kind of program in the CIP, maybe in the paving program, maybe one street a year or something, and have a priority list of streets that can get converted through our existing mechanisms into complete streets. Because otherwise we'll be waiting forever for new development to come.
That's a great
right?
pickup. Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are some of the bigger ones. The other big one from earlier, which you didn't touch on, but in this presentation is, let's see, I think you have a whole slide about infill. You list like, I think 12 different infill areas. Yeah, here it is.
Yeah, the land
in the
use
city.
chapter.
On transportation. We asked him to focus on transportation.
No, I know, but this is related to transportation in that, you list, was it 12 different infill priority areas. And pretty much for every one, you mentioned adding a significant amount of, well, I shouldn't say significant, adding housing. As far as adding, almost everyone mentions adding affordable housing incomes 80 to 120%. So my question for transportation is that I didn't see an analysis in here, in that chapter, or in transportation about what's the impact of that on a transportation system as far as adequate infrastructures? Because if we do get, theoretically, if we build out entirely with this infill, that could be a significant amount of traffic. I mean, there's the list, for example, like the Bay Ridge Shopping Center, as well as the Hillsmere down in my neck of the woods. You mentioned the WNAV site, but in particular, in my neck of the woods, since I know that best, Forest Drive already has a concern issues with traffic. And I think you can get to a point where the traffic's not going to be impactful if we can build up these multimodal alternatives, right? And you mentioned in here also adding parking garages, which I liked in various parts of the city. You identified the need, which again, I think is really good and needed. But collectively, I think, because that's one thing that's going to potentially limit this. If this is our growth plan, I think it should be stated that, acknowledging that, look, if this were all to happen tomorrow, we don't have the infrastructure to support it. It should almost be some kind of something in corporate, because this guides development, right? So we want to guide it in a way where it's done incrementally, responsibly, where it's not going to lead to failure. Because right now, that's essentially, I think, what we're setting ourselves up with this growth plan as far as the traffic and transportation impact.
Yeah, I think we're being very careful and cautious in the way we talk about those recommendations for those infill sites that you referenced. They're basically large sites that we anticipate will change in some way over the next 10 to 20 years from their current use to something else. And we wanted to try to get ahead of that. And what we provide are some bullet points for things that a developer or a community should have in mind as they think about what might be appropriate for those sites. What we don't do is project how much housing should be on each of those sites. We do say, you're right, that we do say almost all of them could accommodate some additional housing, but in every case, it is going to be very contingent upon the transportation network that's available. And that's going to be determined on a case-by-case basis. So it's very tricky to assess or analyze that. But I think that we could acknowledge that better. That's a determining factor, frankly, in what gets built. It's every project that exceeds a certain number of daily trips has to do a traffic impact study by our city's code, and that's when the rubber literally hits the road. That's when we kind of learn which roads are going to be failing if we add this number of trips and which ones won't, which intersections need to be rejiggered. And so we don't know any of that until we know what the actual proposals are, but we do know we need more housing, or housing options, at least in a way that's more sustainable. So,
Yeah.
but I think we'll definitely think about how we could acknowledge this sort of the need to, realistically what we could support, but
Yeah, I mean, and you do to a certain degree, because I think a number of these you do mention, which again I liked, is the I think the need to add structured parking in both like the Bay Ridge and Hillsmere, and also I think in your neck of the woods, WNAV, which I think is good. And so yeah, that's going to depend on development, and hopefully we could work in the policy where they'll have to build some of the infrastructure to help support us. But there's also, to the other hand, some of that's going to need to be some of the nearby, like if we know that roughly between this and that amount of housing is allowed on this property, and I know I'm speaking outside my ward, but as an example, like the WNAV, like would we not want to look at and maybe identifying here's a corridor that's going to need significant improvement by the city, not just the developer who may need to do other things, but maybe there's something we need to do and prioritize to prepare for that growth, right?
yeah.
And again, you do that to a certain degree. I'm just trying to think of, because that was one of my impressions after reading that.
Got you. Yeah, sure.
It is. Oh, you know.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we all can be reminded that we all know that every ward is different, and every need is different, and residents are different, and what their wants and needs and wishes happen to be, and it's hard to balance all of that out. What may look good in one ward may not look good in another, and it may be a myriad of things that align with that statement. But I think that's the hard part of coming up with a comprehensive plan. You have a mixture of people and ages and demographics and all kinds of things, and water and no water. And so it makes it really, really difficult. It's almost like if it looks good there, but then it sets something off somewhere else. So I think we all have to be cognizant of what we do now, because you can live at 5 West Street, but if you live at 8 West Street, you'll see something totally different. And so that's really hard to kind of bring together and come up with a plan that satisfies everyone, and it won't. I've got a lot of commercial industrial, which, people kind of, woo, kind of thing. And it's like, ooh, what opportunities. But the residents have to be considered, and what I've said many, many times is we've got to live with whatever goes there. Nobody else does, whatever ward that happens to be. And when there's a problem, we have to try to solve it or fix it. And nobody else, I'm not saying doesn't care, but it doesn't affect them. So I think we need to take a look at that. We can all look in silos. That's easy to do. But we have to look out for those who are actually impacted by what occurs. But I don't envy your job at all.
Yeah, it is very challenging to do this in a way that is cross-cutting across the whole. When you look at the comp plan, keep in mind that the goals should generally be applicable citywide. They are kind of principled things that really, as a city, we should be trying to implement. And then the recommended actions are going to be much more specific. And some of those might be specific to a ward or a particular part of the city. But we've really tried to come up with goals that could be broadly applicable, that are just sort of our values, That's really the way it's set up. But I mean, for example, we got a comment recently that came to us through Alderwoman Tierney that was from a constituent who said, you know, I see you've divided the comprehensive plan into the thriving city, the functional city, the adaptive city. Those are the three big sections. Where's the historic city? And the response is, well, like 85% of the city is not historic. You know, it's clearly the historic district has an oversized role and influence on our city. It's the center of, you know, government and civic center and downtown, but you know, we just tried very carefully to sort of come up with things that could be broadly applicable. And there's a lot in this comprehensive plan about historic preservation, but to kind of have one whole to divide the whole comprehensive plan and devote a quarter of it to didn't seem to make sense. You know, so that's just an example. We had to make some considerations like that.
I distinctly remember in the Upper West Street sector study was a big heart, and it said, don't forget about the people. And that pretty much summed it all up. You could probably write a comprehensive plan, it'd be one page.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your team's efforts.
All right,
welcome.
we are
Thanks.
going to get moving along. You can save your other questions. I would say email them to Eric or the team if we have other questions or comments. We can always bring them back before at another time. But we do have another presenter that was told 5 o'clock. For
Is this the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric and team. We appreciate it. I don't know why. I got a tickle in my throat today, so. It's been one of those things. It's only when I sit in this room. Yeah, exactly. Welcome. Yes, thank you. You can move the mic over if you want to sit closer. There you go. And if you'll just state your name and company, that would be great for a record.
Dorian Rubos, Synoptics, North America.
Director Katie Nash representing Optic America.
Thank you.
While Dorian is setting up, I'll get us started. Dorian is the
Green button, right?
Can I just plug this in? That's a PDF thing, the actual PowerPoint. Something.
You want the PowerPoint?
Yeah. There's just as an apple.
Can we PowerPoint plug this thing right?
It's local government. We're going to adapt. So Dorian is the Vice President for Sales for the Americas. So he is visiting from out of town today. So we appreciate the indulgence of having us here. The purpose of today for us is to sort of give you a brief but wide summary of the technology that's available. I think it's pretty relevant to the conversation that we just had about safety and how safety enforcement technology has advanced over the last several years and quite frankly where it's going. So Dorian's presentation, you'll note when it is available, is pretty long, so we'll need to pick it up, but we wanted to provide you with whatever was of interest. So as he goes through these things, please feel free to interrupt, ask questions, or Madam Chair, tell us to speed it up and move on. If you are ready, I can just kick it over to you for the interest of time, but I'll take some notes, and if you have any questions, we're of course here.
Well, Genoptics Smart Mobility. We are in the business of anything to do with traffic safety and traffic overview and civil security. So a lot of actually what you were talking about in the last two presentations, which we kind of listened in on, a lot of our solutions you'll see, or a lot of the things that we do address a lot of different safety factors and roadway management that we have in place globally. I will try to go through this pretty quick, but it's more about just educating you and actually kind of getting to the questions and things that you have at hand for your city, not what's general or what we do generally. So again, Genoptic Smart Mobility. We have actually three different sections: optics, smart mobility, and automotive. I'm representing the smart mobility. It's kind of what you're talking about: vision zero, zero deaths, reducing accidents, reducing or maximizing pedestrian safety. If you're talking about adding in bike lanes and more bike mobility, everything to do with that. We do point out that as a company, our reach is pretty far. So we've actually built all the camera and lens components to the Mars rover. We've built them all for the second series going out there. We have a lot of experience in the tech field and beyond. We are represented global. We are a global company. We do business in over 60 countries. We have over 30,000 installations. I represent the Americas, which is Zone 4 there. So we cover North America, South America, the Caribbean, and pretty much the entire, that part of the globe. So just a look at us a little bit and who's here to talk to you today. We have been around actually since even before this as an offshoot of Zeiss Corporation. But we have been making cameras and camera lenses since they were new and fresh, all the way back into the early days. We then were some of the first to do photography, road cameras, cameras for crime scenes, police, everything like that. And then in the 60s, when smart mobility was a thing and speed cameras and red light cameras came out in 60 and 66 respectively, we were the first in there implementing them as well with law enforcement in Europe. All the way up through the 90s and today's, we have always been at the forefront of developing cameras and technology for roadways all the way up. We are not an implementation group. We are not a company that comes in and tries to find technology and implements programs for you. We're actually the full service company that manufactures, develops, researches, builds, and then deploys. Our headquarters are in Jupiter, Florida. We're over 4,300 employees. We have over 400 engineers worldwide in research, development, artificial intelligence, and camera development for all of this. And so we are one of the forefront leaders in law enforcement and civil security, or smart mobility and civil security. In the US, or in North America, just in North America alone, well over 4,000 cameras, 4,000 plus in the US, that we have deployed through other vendors that implement our stuff. And we have, since 2021, pulled away from working with anyone else in our direct-to-market company ourselves to run our own programs. And that's where we always say the reason we come to people and why partner with us is our artificial intelligence, which runs a lot of our programs, is adaptable, customizable. We are the single source, so from a product that you're looking at to even a solution that you're looking to solve, if it's not out there yet, we're the ones that actually do the research development, do the build, do the testing, implementation, piloting, and then the full program. So single source, customized and flexible, just like I said. We have developed things for communities and for the federal government where they have asked for a type of solution, and we've been able to deliver that for their particular need. Our systems obviously have been very effective over the last 90 plus years, and maintenance and services are all part of us as we're a sole source. So there's no other place to go to if something is needing to be looked at, whether it be software, hardware, analytics, front end, back end call centers, everything's in-house. As we get into photo enforcement, which is just one aspect of the smart mobility. So we talk about the normal things you hear about, the normal things you know in Maryland are speed and red light, which of course we do. But we're a single system with multiple applications. So from one camera that we put up, we can monitor red light, we can actually watch speed, we can do automated license plate reading, number plate reading, and then the DVR video surveillance camera. So the one camera can cover a lot of aspects for one location and do multiple jobs. Some of our basic services is the red light and speed that we talked about, but we can talk about other things that we're doing, whether it be school zone speed, spot speed, normal locations, school bus stop arm enforcement. We actually can do point-to-point speed, which is average speed over a distance of road instead of one spot. That's been done a lot in tunnels and bridges. We do it in a long stretch in Scotland of about 145 miles stretch of roadway. The LPR that we have on board our camera can be fixed, can be mobile sites, and can be put in automobiles, and that can either be used for law enforcement or parking. So we do a lot of we can do a lot of programs where, and I know at least it was when I was here years ago, it's a thing with the permitted parking in neighborhoods and stuff, and what we do, we were able to put LPRs on parking enforcement vehicles, and all they have to do is drive neighborhoods, and if the car has a permit, the camera will sense that it's a registered plate to a permit and ignore it. If it does not, it'll pull that data and instantly send it to a back office system to send the registered owner a ticket, and no one even has to stop to address the car. And we've also the vessel detection, which that's the one thing we just developed for Homeland Security, which we'll talk about a little bit. Other expanding things that we do, when you talk about, for example, red light, instead of, not just red light running, but if you have problems with people blocking the intersection or the box, we can deal with blocking the box, what we call block the box or blocking the intersection. Pedestrian crossing enforcement. Our artificial intelligence is able to actually pick up active people within a crosswalk and know that if a car is going to still go through, but there was a person in it creating a situation, it can't actually recognize that and grab the vehicle. Stop sign enforcement, illegal turn, bus restricted lane, which now transmits, and I know you're starting to talk about bike lanes. The same thing can be done there because the cameras know the difference between a commercial vehicle, a regular vehicle, a motorcycle, and then knowing that any of those are not a bicycle, which should not be in this lane. So can enforce any lane and enforce any vehicles not supposed to be within it. Railroad crossing, pollution control, low emission, that's a big European thing where you get permitted to even drive in an area, which reduces congestion and emissions. Our cameras are counting everything that go by. So even if you're in enforcement, when you talk about engineering studies and kind of futuristic knowing of what are our road patterns and when are we really going to be looking, when are we going to have to start looking at, there's a lot of usage on the road. The cameras are always counting everything that goes by and classifying it, and we can put it into data counts for what your traffic management is. And to give you that data so that the traffic engineers or the people in the road department can actually analyze how the roads are being used throughout the year, different parts of the year, and break down what they're going to need to do 5 years out, 10 years out, and so on. We're getting now into audible detection. We've just started piloting that in a couple places in the country, and that's for, loud vehicles, loud decibel noise pollution. Access control, wireless signal detection, vessel detection I mentioned, facial recognition, mobile app integration. Some of that we can go over, but I'll want to move through to, again, the camera solutions, kind of all-in-one solution. All of these things that we're talking about basically go from just a few different camera types that we have, but multiple solutions can be run through the different platforms, depending on how they're implemented out into the field. And a lot of this, again, goes to the deep artificial intelligence learning of the cameras, being able to detect and understand what it's looking at. An example there, which I'd go into later, I'll just skip it now, is if Maryland will all of a sudden just change its license plate the complete way it looked. Most cameras would look at that and you'd have to spend a couple months feeding information into it, whereas we can actually just let our camera run for, usually takes between 1 and 2 weeks, and the camera has already learned the new plate and what it's looking at. And we've had that in the field before, where it drops from a 99.8% recognition rate down into the 30s, because when we did it in Tennessee once, they went from a white plate with black lettering to a blue plate with white lettering, and it got the camera confused. But within 2 weeks of us not even just letting it run, it was right back up into the 99th percentile, because the camera had learned what it was looking at. It's not trying to just read letters and numbers, it's scanning the plate and learning what it's recognizing what it's looking at. As far as being invasive, we have non-invasive solutions. So when you talk about red light, it's not the way of the old days where you should never have to put sensors in the roadway anymore, but our newer cameras don't even need to tap into the signal box at the intersection. So the AI on board is able to look at the light and start watching and recognizing the actual light patterns. So it knows when it turns red, and then there's a radar sensor on there to detect whether the vehicle is going to stop or not in time. And therefore the camera's doing the enforcement without actually having to tap into any of the structure of the city. It's just completely autonomous on its own on the pole. Okay. As far as speed goes, so when we're talking about speed and everyone just saying, yes, it's going to get your speeding vehicle. The technology there can handle multiple lanes, so anything from your normal 1 to 2 lanes roads up to 5+. Our sensors go across the roadway we're looking at, and about 100 meters out is what we're monitoring for each site, which means we're monitoring every vehicle in that entire space, both lengthwise of the roadway and distance. So all the way, we're monitoring every car across those lanes, and we're monitoring every car within that 100 meters. Changes lanes, it doesn't matter. The camera's picking up the change in movement and the behavior, which gives us the ability to also help with wrong direction driving, illegal overtaking, minimum speed, if that's even a thing anymore. Speed limits, especially when they change, like for back in the day when, and I don't know that this is still true, but if there's particularly some reason that trucks have to go slower than cars, and we would have the ability to do that. Just like we have the ability to monitor if you're in a school zone and that speed limit changes for say an hour and a half in the morning and an hour and a half in the afternoon, but it runs at a different speed limit the rest of the day. The camera can be programmed to basically enforce two different speed limits at different points of the day, depending on what the school is set up to do. And then dedicated lane usage, which is whether you have a bus lane or a taxi lane or anything that cars or bikes or something else is not supposed to be in, the camera can pick that up. With red light, I talked about the block the box, the pedestrian crossing, but it can also do illegal left turn, U-turn. It's doing speed as well. So even if the red light wasn't enforcing speed's still checked. And it's still logged actually on every vehicle. So even the ones that aren't violating, you still have the data set of cars, how many are going through there, how many are speeding. We just did locally, I won't say where, but a study. And we were able to give them at the site. We just gave them a 12-day sample, but every car that went by, how many were speeding, how many weren't, here's your percentage. And they're within, they've had a program, so they're within 98%. But it can show that you're within 98%. You have about 1.9% of the vehicles. Granted, that's still a large number. It's a heavy roadway. But you can kind of show analytically through the data how the program is working. What compliance are you getting? And these programs are all meant to be able to show that they're out there for a specific purpose and that they are working, doing the job that they're supposed to. These are just examples of some images of vehicles we would get and to show the difference. And I want to say this up front, we don't use white light. So a lot of systems you may have seen, you see a flash. We use all infrared lighting for these style of enforcement cameras. So we have an example of a day when you wouldn't be using a lens anyway. And then we have an example of dusk, which is that's kind of bright sun, and then night. But we're showing that we have easy capability of picking up everything without setting off large lights on the roadway through. You know, every camera itself comes with 16 IR nodes just in the housing. So usually we don't need any extra lighting. If we do, it's an IR sensor, but we try not to put any hard white flash on the roadway as a distraction.
What'd you do for that one though? Because I see a reflection in the back. Is that not infrared?
No, I think it's other lights approaching. Like if you look at the right, that's a headlight of some kind, and then there's another one off to the left. That's traffic behind the car. That's not our flash.
Did you have a picture?
No, the only way we
at
don't.
night without?
Yeah, no, we don't use any white flash in Canada. The only place we still use white flash is if we're doing a driver liability program. There's about 3 states on the West Coast where you still have to get the face of the driver. When we do that, everyone has to put some kind of a white flash near the intersection. It's not going directly at the person, but you're trying to light up the intersection so you can actually, because getting the picture of the face of the person driving is much more difficult in the dark. So that's where we have to do that, but not in this case here. Fixed mobile, we do all types of installations, and that's whether we're putting in a nicely pole, and we have decorative arms that we use that can be blended in with any aesthetic to a municipality. And they can be either on poles that we install if we need to, or if there's already infrastructure within the municipality that we can use, and we can use any type of pole or road furniture that we can get our camera up to a height of between 12 and 16 feet and can get power to it, whether from below or above. And then off into a mobile solution where we have trailers that are solar based that can be moved around. These things can usually run for 6 months to a year with average sun before they're needed to come in and have the batteries checked. Everything's also monitored, so everything for us, even on a mobile platform, any of our cameras, if there's any issues or things as it goes through its self-check, engineers are notified within 2 hours to 3 hours of any camera involving any downtime, because if it's not running in the self-check, it will kind of turn itself into a warning period and alert an engineer that it's not working. Same thing happens with the trailer, not just with the cameras, but with battery status. If the solar power is starting not to keep up with the battery charging because of either high number of incidents or it just hasn't gotten enough sun over 4 months, it alerts an engineer that it's time to come in and fully plug the batteries in to get 100% charged and to redeploy with the solar panels. So our systems, even out in the field, are communicating with our staff at all times. When we talked about the license plate readers, we put up here, we're actually a pioneer in ALPR technology, which we invented in 1979 and first deployed to law enforcement in 1984. And ALPR is used for a number of things. Civil security, of course, so for hot lists that law enforcement might have, and that could be anyone from wanted persons to you can even upload lists. We've done it before, uploading lists of uninsured motorists. That program's happened in a couple states. LPR can be used for that. Access control, whether it be a government building or a parking structure that only certain people are allowed to park in. But in this case, all the cameras have the law enforcement LPR on there, which is just grabbing every license plate and looking at it, and it can be compared to whatever list they load, whether it be an NCIC list, the state list, county list. We've had them in school zones where the sex offender registry has been uploaded, so it will notify if anyone's within that school area. To include anyone that the law enforcement is looking for, just trying to investigate, they can upload their own plates that they're looking for and information like that. That can be utilized, that can be not utilized. It's not so these are all things that each municipality chooses what they want to be on board the cameras and how they want to utilize them. When you are using ours is the only one in the world that can handle 3 lanes or more, every car in it, 99.8% hit rate, a notification rate in real time to law enforcement, and guaranteed under 5 seconds. It's usually 1 to 2. And we're the only one that can capture vehicles and plates up to 188 miles an hour. So no other camera can do that. Not that you need that here, but it's just the width of the technical capability. So the other thing it's analyzing is it's also seeking the cars. It's not watching or storing stuff. And in here in Maryland, it's very strict policy on LPR. It doesn't go to private servers or private cloud. It goes directly to the state through the LSAG system, which we have capability to attach to. But the other thing is, ours is a little bit, just watching plates is one thing, and you can go back and look. If something happens, they can go back and look and grab a plate number. If they have anything, or if they're looking for anything, it's actually going to give them, or if they see anything that they're looking at, it won't just give them that one screenshot, but the camera will give them a program of progression of what the car has been seen doing, where it's been in the city, what its patterns are. Is it following somebody? Is somebody following it? It will give them the best chance to see that car in the future based on the patterns that it's seen it come through the city before. So just extra data usually for law enforcement. The ANPR part is more for the ticketing part where it's scanning the plate. So, as we get into how does a ticket processed, if for whatever event that you're enforcing, the ANPR is what's reading the plate and then auto processing it into the ticket pattern. So going into the back office, these are the real-time alerts for the ALPR. If that alert was, say, that car's also speeding and the ANPR is processing it, then it goes into a different system to process that ticket, and the ANPR automatically runs it through the NLET system to put it in the ticket format for the police. So, and then everything our system does is very transparent to our client. All the data is theirs. Everything that is running is theirs. It's all available to the client. It's not something we're on the day-to-day, here's the information you need. We don't do any of that. The software, the video analytics and everything is right at the fingertips of the client. It's all their data. It's built for them. We can aid in some reports, but everything's built in to have them be able to do their own reporting. And that's everything from whatever law enforcement's doing, but again, going back to tracking the data and the traffic management within the city at the location. So you can be tracking all of that traffic data in real time or in chunks and do reports at whatever the city's leisure is. And then, so in here, what's happening to the camera here would be, granted, this is an overlay. If you logged into the live video, we'd just see the cars. We do an overlay to show you kind of what the camera actually, to give you an idea of how the camera is looking, and to explain a little bit with artificial intelligence. It's seeing that and it's knowing, okay, that car is this make, model, color, this plate is this. And in an instant flash of a second, that's all run through. And if anyone needs to know anything about that car, they're auto alerted, whether it be direct to the dispatch terminal, the car in the cruiser in the car, or a detective's cell phone. It's all now the same camera also here at this intersection, is monitoring, is anyone running the red light? Is anyone speeding? So it's doing multiple things at time, and it's able to kick out any of the data on any of those facets at any point that you would need to run it. I brush over this one just to give a general idea of artificial intelligence and deep learning. It's basically if you could, take the human brain and put it in the camera, where, the little person sitting in the camera doesn't need to take a break. It's just always operating in the camera, but it can not necessarily learn and become self-aware like in the Terminator movies, but it can learn enough of what it's trying to do. It can learn new plates. It can learn the patterns. It can learn exactly what it's specifically engineered to learn, and that's it. But where it comes in handy here, if you look here, is the reading. And legible and illegible plates. Everyone's seen the rusted out plates, or they're covered. And if you just have normal conventional optical ALPR, it's not going to be able to capture a lot of that stuff because it's trying to read it kind of like a typewriter hits keys, to where you're reading just a letter and a number and a letter. Whereas AI deep learning is kind of scanning the plate almost like you would see in a sci-fi movie or something, but it's just scanning the whole plate, and it's read so many things that it only needs partial characters to know what they're really looking at. And it's nothing's 100%. I say it's 99.7. But in all those cases, our camera would be able to pick up and read those particular examples and that's why we have that sheet. The alert to phone, we also are able to run that system through a cell phone for law enforcement, or we're adapting it for parking. So if anyone needs it for parking or other type of enforcement in the city with streets or something, they'd be able to take kind of a snapshot of the plate and it'll run it through the system. We'll get to a point where you're just getting into a drop-down menu to choose the violation, hit approve, and then again, it's going to just cycle through the back system, and a ticket will be mailed to the registered owner for the violation, kind of with a photo of their plate. I will skip over the road user charging. I don't think you have that here, but just our capability of tolling, tunnel management, bridge, HOV lanes, restricted access, weigh-in motion for heavy vehicles, things of that we talked about may not apply here, but the capability is here and far advanced. Software in the back end, everything runs through back office facility. So all the data, all the tickets, everything that we're doing runs through one back office facility that the clients have full access to. So everything from, not just the incidents and evaluations, which that's where it starts with police, is seeing the incidents and evaluations. So like an example of a speed violation and them reviewing the speed violation, or then an example of a red light violation, and looking at, well, there's video there they'd be looking at as well. Everything from that straight on into, then we go into the processing flow, as I explained. That event happens, goes straight into the ANPR, which in 9 out of 10 cases auto processes it and runs it through NLETS, does a BMV check, puts it in a ticket format, and has it to police within a day or so for police to review. And as soon as they've reviewed and approved, it goes out in the mail the very next day. So especially in a state here where it's 14 days, ticket's got to be out. We don't like to push the boundary of, all right, we're always getting 12, 13, 14. We'd rather have the ticket to law enforcement in 1 to 2 days. They've looked at it in 1 to 2 days, and that thing's going out by day 4 or 5 from the actual incident. And we do have that capability. Back end has all the big data management we're talking about, all the analytics from red light speed, all the vehicle counts, everything that we're doing for clients. And then we can put that into performance tests, or reports, I'm sorry. So in the transparency portion, transparent with the client, trying to work with the client, work with our cities as partners in road safety, and being able to show performance reports, not just of cameras uptime and downtime, but the performance on the roadways. Okay, we're really shaping speed here. It was this when we started. Your compliance rate was only 67%. We've got it to 85%. We're really moving the goals to get up to 98, 99% compliance. So performance reports are important, just like the statistical reports that go into that, and that's a lot of all the different vehicle types and traffic data, finance reports, so everything can run through the back end on the whole program. It's a turnkey program where we're trying to come to work for our clients and not have too much strain put on their already taxed employees, but they're more managing from the back office, seeing what's happening, but we have our staff managing the day-to-day for them however they would like. And that's all, again, customizable to and include a payment portal for any program that's set up. So now, for what you were hearing earlier too, we feel that we're the company that's built for smart mobility, not just for today, speed and red light. A lot of things we're doing right now still don't have legislation for. We already know they're hot topics. We know they're things that people are wanting to do. So we're already developing them. They're already, Europe usually goes first anyway. And we're just not off of trying and building anything. So this is already starting on the West Coast. So we've already developed and integrated noise pollution detection. We call it audible detection, so loud vehicle and everything. That's already being piloted, set to pilot later this year with the California Highway Patrol and a couple other places. And is starting to, we're already getting a lot of requests. It's starting to, I did not realize it was such a hot topic, but apparently it is. And that technology is already we're already in the demonstration phase, working on deploying the pilot phase for, probably Q4 this year or late Q3. We do wireless signal detection. That goes along with anything with our LPR. It can detect signals in the area, wireless, Bluetooth, cellular. It can be attached to identifying signals coming from cars that the police are looking at. To and include, we can use it. It's been used in prison systems before to where they're identifying signals where they shouldn't be, and now it's being looked at in school cases where if you have a lockdown because of any type of active incident, this could track the signal of the person and let responding law enforcement know exactly where their person is in a building. So I'm happy to answer questions, but we don't talk about it a lot on the surface because sometimes it generally starts to make people like, are you spying? It's not spying, it is just straight metadata that it's looking at. It can't identify a person. It can track a signal and know where it is, but if you want to identify it, you still have to have probable cause and a warrant, and you still have to have all that things go through due process to actually identify a person attached to any of that. But we've gotten to the forefront where, yes, we can detect them all over, and that's to and include from the moving vehicle that's passing at speed, and then attach it to that plate file. In this case here, to know where that signal's coming from. So you have a stolen auto or carjacking or something like that, and you've identified the car 9 out of 10 times they've fled. How do we know who was in the car? If we have our unit working with our LPR, we could actually tell you the devices that were in the car at the time. This is a big one that's coming out. We'll be piloting this later this year. We've actually started one of the world's first programs in Australia, but distracted driving technology. So that is what it is. It's mainly, obviously, for hands-free law. I know Maryland's, there's a little latitude in there. I know the interest here that we've had so far is seatbelt, because it also will do seatbelt. This can be modified to help with HOV lane as well. But this will be, as we know, you're coming out of COVID, and you see the stats on distracted driving, and the fatality numbers and the accident numbers are climbing exponentially. They're surpassing almost everything. So the hands-free laws have been, they started trickling, and I think in the few years past COVID here, they're just coming out in every state. It seems like this year alone, several states even have added on, and they have started to become more restrictive. In my home state of Ohio, they went right to we are not allowed to hold a wireless device in our hand at all while operating a motor vehicle. You just cannot touch it. And it seems to be going that way. So again, when I bring that up, because we're building ourselves already. We're already doing that in Australia and other parts of the world. We're built and ready to do that here in the United States as well. And this is not trying to grab people's face. We actually have a program too. It depends. So, for most programs like here, this is from Australia because the person's on the wrong side of the car, but their face is auto blurred because we're not trying to get a face. They're just trying to see, are they holding a phone in a certain place? So the program can actually auto blur the face, and we can do that, or we cannot have the blur. It can be done either way. So to protect privacy, we can actually absolutely put a blur up and hide drivers' faces and not have that available to, say, us. Law enforcement could use it if they ever needed to, but that feature can be put in there or taken away. That's, again, what depends on what the client need is. Here's an example of our first deployment in Australia. So we're one of the first. And of course, Australia uses heavy solar because that thing could sit out there in the sun of Australia for over a year and never be moved or touched. Can be deployed both on regular street furniture, in a mobile trailer platform, or even on overpasses on a tripod monitored by law enforcement or whoever's running the program at the time. And then vessel detection, this is where the example of somebody saying, we have an issue, can you help solve? And that's the government saying, hey, we would like to try to come up with something a little bit more high-tech, more of a quote-unquote LPR, or license plate reader, but for the waterways to detect traffic. And so what we did for them, and took us about 10 months to get through phase 1 and 2, but we have built a system that is able to detect boat traffic. Obviously, that's fairly simple, you know, a boat's going by, but we have been able to get it to the camera being able to identify the class and make of the vehicle, measure it within a foot to tell you how long it is, how many engines are on board. With infrared, we can tell how many people are at least in the open viewed areas on a boat. And then as we increase the signal, we should be able to pick the wireless signals up off of it. But we're now getting into the camera capability of being able to read the number on the side of the boat and the name off the back of the boat. So
I would say that's probably not something that we're much interested in because we have nothing to do with boat traffic and DNR.
I always put it in here just to show when people are talking to us and you start talking to other companies, it's what you know, you always have to answer the question, why you? Because there's not another company that'll walk in here to talk to you that can do that.
Yeah.
With somebody asking you in 10 months. They just don't have the research, the development, and the drive to take something a client needs and make it a reality, unless in that kind of time. So I just show it's just our bandwidth. You might have another need. You might be like, you come with something obscure saying, you know, we really have a problem with this. We don't think there's any solution for it. We love taking that as a challenge, going, what kind of problem do you have? Looking at the problem and seeing how we can work with you to solve it.
Yeah, yeah. For us as Transportation Committee, I think my original intent was really focused on that, the crosswalk and the speed zone technology, just kind of learning a little bit about that portion.
Well, you'll like this one for the future. We're already working on this in the autonomous transportation. I think there's 2 sites in the US that's working on, mainly in Europe, but we're building all the infrastructure to cities, because anytime you're going to get into phase 4 of autonomous driving where there's just physically no operator on a vehicle, the space age, we're already working on technology that's communicating with it to know when it's safe to move and not move around corners and stuff like that. So just all the future thinking. And I know we went through this pretty quick, but I just want to give you an overview and kind of get to what it is that you're looking for and the types of things you're trying to tackle in the, you know, in the immediate future, going off into a 5-year plan, and then hopefully how we can be helpful maybe in a future partnership in helping you accomplish your goals.
Yeah, definitely. You guys have questions? No questions.
Well, it's time for me to take my medicine.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that gives us a great overview in order for us to take it back to departments. As council, we have the opportunity to make recommendations and things like that, but it's really the department directors that are making the final vendor selection and call. But I was most interested in, you know, the technology that's available so that as we're starting to, as you heard the prior, you know, we're looking at our future, you know, the next 20 years, 30 years, and how we make our city, keep it safe for the walking and the biking.
Yeah, that's why we're very well already geared to handle everything that was in the previous presentation, especially with the bike lanes is becoming, as you're having to either take space from roadway or somehow add it in, you know, off a Vision Zero platform, you know, you have to have your road space separate from your bike space, ideally to where there's even a barrier of some sort, some type of structure or pole between the bike and the car, and then your pedestrians even. If you're doing it with barriers, obviously, there's really not a way a car can get in there. But a lot of people, that's not the way they can really go. So they just make a nice wide lane. It's always painted a different color. Green seems to be the standard. Works very well. But yeah, we're already geared towards, with the technology we currently have, being able to sense if something's in that lane that is not a bicycle, which helps. I think the pedestrian stuff that you were mentioning, already built, capable of doing that. That is another big one that comes up in cities and ones we've talked about and deployed demonstrations on before. And then, of course, controlling speed is always at the forefront. Speed kills probably the most in traffic crashes every year. And that's not going to change until things are done about it. Everywhere a camera program has ever gone, I mean, it's just, you see report after report that shows that it does work. You can look at the NTSB report from 2017, and then the NHTSA report that all showed they absolutely recommend it, reduce speed by, 70 to 99%. And I see that most areas you put it in, you're going to gain a compliance of upwards, where maybe only 1 or 2% left. Sometimes that's still a high number, but if you start looking at your crash rate over the first 2 years after implementing a program, you should see a reduction of anywhere from 30 to 75%. So your crashes are coming down. And there's no way to tell, and I wouldn't want somebody to have to die to prove the statistic, but I'll tell you, if you reduce accidents by 50 to 75% as former law enforcement officer, I guarantee you've prevented at least one person from dying.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
No, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time and
Thanks
finally
for having
getting you
us.
on our calendar. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you. Oh, I gotta take that off of there.
What time is that? The complaint news. Okay. Oh, that's yours. All right. The next item up on our agenda is the Transportation Department update by Marcus Moore. Thank you for being so patient, Marcus.
My pleasure. Good evening again. I think Chair O'Neill wanted me to just kind of talk a little bit about the mobility plan and the winding down of Annapolis Go. Our timeline of replacing or starting our own pilot with what was known, what they were doing, which was the flex feeder kind of a service. So what I'd like to do, there was a press release maybe a week ago that Mitchell put out that's on our website. Then we also had a brief interview with the Capital Gazette yesterday that talked a little bit more about it. And a lot of the questions that your constituents are getting, something so popular, why are we taking it away? The short answer is it was a part of the whole AMRP, the 3P partnership. What can we do to keep the city moving, open, viable, and all? And with those four parts we looked at Bird Bike and Scooter, which is taken off on its own, where we actually get a little bit of revenue each month from it. We look at the rebranding of what we call the Circulator, which is now the Magenta Free Shuttle, which has been hugely popular. We look at what we started in the fall, really winter, the electric cart that we know is the current, and then we have Annapolis Go. Why was such of an odd number of starting May 17th to July 17th? We started the garage rebuild, or it came down on or about that first Monday in May, and it was supposed to be about 13 or 14 months, so that's where that was grabbed, and we were able to finish it a month early. So that's where it continued on. it continued to grow as far as popularity and size of where we covered, around the city. Popularity because of cost or the lack thereof of you or I traveling. So let's just say Cynthia, Tripp, and I are all traveling together. I'm $2, Cynthia's $1, Tripp is $1. We're gonna pay $4 to go from, let's say, Park Place to City Dock because we're gonna take a cruise for lunch. You can't do that with Uber or Lyft at those kind of prices. So we were heavily subsidized, and the Baltimore Sun asked how much. And it's no secret that it cost us $850,000. There's no secret that it was just too costly for too few that were using it. It was used. We looked at a few times, we said, well, Earth Day, can we go free? And we talked about it with the mayor's chief of staff, how much money will we lose, how many, that kind of thing. So of course that shoots ridership up. So we don't really know the true numbers because we had no way of auditing them, but it was popular. They were a transportation solution that came with the vehicle, the insurance, the driver, the wrapping, and all. So the cost per hour was very, very high. And as you can see, around the county, around the state, and around the country, it is very popular in rural areas that you don't need a regular bus coming down there every 30, 40 minutes, every 2 hours, or even twice a day, but on demand. So that's one of the things. I think I sent an article out about what was going on in Central Virginia and how those rural areas were bringing the populace into the healthcare appointments, work, shopping, and everything else. What we like to do is the same kind of thing. We'll still have our spine, which is the fixed route and the feeder into it, because we look at there's Ward 7 that has the senior center down there that we wouldn't need to send the Brown route from, as Alderman Savage said, from the Giant there down Edgewood to Bimby Beach every time it runs, every 45 minutes. But there may be a need to go there 2 or 3 times a day or on demand to bring them in. So we want to look at the other side of Spa Road when you cross over on the other side of Forest Drive. Places that aren't serviced by our fixed route. Yes, granted, within a mile, or really 3/4 of a mile of our fixed route, we do have mobility, and that is twice the fare of our fixed route. So we may have priced ourselves out of what a senior may be able to do, because there's no round trip or 4-day pass that rides all day. $4, $8 is your round trip. You're going to the shopping and coming back, and a fixed income that can be kind of difficult to do. But anyway, when we're looking at what we want to do, the real thing is that we did put a RFP out early May. All the bids were in. At the pre-bid meeting with our procurement officer, the Deputy Director Dua is the project manager. We had about 19 prospers that were interested in what we want them to do. If I back up a minute here and talk about what VIA is doing with Annapolis Go, what we want is their software, because we have the infrastructure called the drivers in the vehicles, and we can do it as a part of our own service that we currently have, and we can do it cheaper. So those bids came in, and we're reviewing, well, I should back up. Out of those 19 that were interested, 7 made the deadline and have a bid in. We want to look at those top 3 and figure out a time to have them give us a presentation. Tomorrow, Kwaku and I will be meeting with the new procurement officer, Mike, and we're going to be reviewing that list to create a short list of who we want to have come back to give us presentations. That could be as early as late July, but realistically, maybe the first week in August, that we have those presentations that go on for about a week or so. Then we'll make an offer, and then we start designing what it is we want. And looking at this pilot, of course, cost is a big thing, because sometimes you can't get all the data you want in 1 year. So 18 months, 2 years, depending on how it goes. And this will be a learning process. The county, Anne Arundel, is doing something similar. Montgomery County as well. There's a few other counties throughout. And when we looked at their recommendation list of those that gave us a bid, we've reached out to those that are using some of those prospers that put in. How are you doing? So we're in that stage of it. There will be a gap in service because even though it says the 17th when Annapolis go, they decided they'll pack up and go on the 16th, which is Sunday. And we may not be ready to start until sometime in September. Annapolis Go is our name. We want to mirror it the same way. We're going to, package it the same way as the flex feeder that it is. So we want to get that notice to proceed, as I mentioned, sometime in August, and we start developing and planning and designing and testing that kind of ordeal. This was really good for us, a lot of lessons learned. As Eric mentioned in his presentation, we didn't know what to really expect. And the expectations were high, and they delivered higher for our constituents, our business owners, and it really kept things moving. And I think you'll agree with what happened with the rebuild of the garage. There's always going to be hiccups and whys, did we or didn't we do certain things? But the bottom line is that that's where we are with those 4 prongs there with electric bike and scooter, Magenta Shuttle, the electric cart, e-cart. So we want to continue to move forward with it, and as you all know, with the ferry that's coming later. Our electric vehicles that are coming later. So we do have a plan in place that things that are talked about are being worked on, and infrastructure being put in place for charging of these things, landing of these things, and the training of these things. Our own mechanics within transportation, and of course public works and all. There's a lot of moving parts, but we're excited about the possibilities that it brings.
Great. Thank you very much. I have one question. You kind of touched on it. So Annapolis Go and its former, or almost former, the $4 plus $1 plus $1. Is that the model you're trying to stick with, or something
That's
similar?
a really good question. No, it'll be the fare of what we have on fixed route, $2 per person. So it's not going to follow the model of what Annapolis Go went with $2, and each person in your group is going for that $1. So we'll stick with our rates of $2 a person, and we'll probably end up still doing what we do now as far as the multi-ride, meaning $4 for all day, that kind of thing. But that'll still be studied when we're testing out and looking at other services. So it might be just $2 each direction, but to keep it in line with what we do. So, basically this will also help us with our reservation system for mobility, our paratransit service. We have an old web-based system that works, but it needs to be upgraded. And that'll all kind of come in together. And as you spread out your service, you get this call on this handheld or this device, who's closer? So strategically placing a vehicle to kind of pick up and go with it. And there's ways of doing that, so it's going to be pretty exciting for our operations crew to kind of look at the design phase and how we roll it out.
So if you're combining, or it sounds like maybe combining, you pick up person A who is a paratransport, would you be able to then pick up person B and C if they were going to a similar location or in a similar?
It could, but not quite. The way I look at it is the paratransit vehicle becomes a part of the flex feeder when they don't have paratransit.
Okay.
So that's not a waste. So if I have 4 in operation, I may have 4.5 or a true 5, because that'll be able to pick up, but it'll be blacked out when that person has that mobility pickup. Even though mobility is a shared ride too. So you have that manifest and you start looking at, let's just say I'm picking up in the neighborhood of Hillsmere and I'm going to Anne Arundel Medical Center. So if I can pick up along the way going that same direction, I would. We don't generally right now with our paratransit have more than 2 or 3 riders unless they're a part of like an aid, what they call, I guess, a personal aid, a PA, or somebody else with them.
Great, thank you. Question?
I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate the thorough report and appreciate your initiative. I'm glad things keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for all your support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yep.
Excuse me. Moving right along. next item on the agenda is 04922 and like 100 amendments. Do you have discussion, questions? Rhonda? No?
No, I mean, I guess I could just start with, like how I want to do this. I guess I would move to recommend favorably just start with Amendment 1.
Okay.
And as, I guess, anybody want to second that one? Do we need to second that? Okay.
I'll second.
So this is one, I can't remember if I mentioned it last time, but anyway, this amendment of mine just sets up a dedicated fund. Instead of just having it, I think as written, it would just go to the transit fund. And I wanted to create something a bit more broader, but also more focused at the same time, where it could be spent on, yeah, so things like Eric just mentioned, as far as non-automobile and some non-transit oriented options, and also go towards expanding facilities. Because I think that's really the issue, the concern people had about waiving all the parking requirements is that they just want to make sure they do have adequate places to park their cars. And I think at the same time, I'd like to move forward the initiatives that Mr. Lashinsky outlined as far as doing what we can to get people out of their cars. And I think this ends up supporting both those things. And it keeps us moving forward anyway.
Awesome. So that will have a favorable recommendation going to the
Just that.
council. Amendment 1.
Do we want to vote on the specific amendments?
I mean, I think that in all fairness, like, we're giving a favorable recommendation for the amendments to go forward, right? So do we need to vote on each individual one, or do we talk about each one?
Yeah, like, because there may be some that the committee doesn't want to recommend. So it would be recommending as amended by the committee.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, I think it would be good if we went through each amendment,
Yeah.
so the public as well as our colleagues could hear.
Yeah. So we want to talk about Amendment 2 then?
Are there any other questions on 1?
No.
No, I agree with moving it to its own fund. Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I will move for the sake of discussion, amendment number 2, Arnett amendment.
Second.
Okay.
Can I speak to this one, Madam Chair?
Sure.
So this one I also would think that we should support because it specifically exempts the maritime districts, because otherwise it may end up conflicting with the larger maritime district overhaul we did a few months back, a year back, whatever it was.
Do you have comments on that?
No comments.
Is there a motion to give a favorable recommendation to the council on amendment number 2?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Would you like to move amendment number 3? Discussion on amendment number 3?
I'll move it.
Second.
All right.
50%.
I am not in favor of this amendment. I believe that if we're going to waive, then it should be up to the individual restaurant to allocate or pay in lieu of for the number of parking spaces that they have. I believe that it hamstrings newer restaurants and businesses because grandfathered-in businesses don't have a parking requirement per se, a specific number of spaces if they don't already have a parking lot. So I would move to not give a favorable recommendation.
I have a question.
Yes.
Have you received any feedback from any of your restaurants in your ward?
Because there are only 4 restaurants in my ward that are single standing restaurants, one of them said that if they wanted to use theirs, they would like to use all of the space that they have because they have 10 spaces that are allotted to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't want probably to use any of them. The other 2 are just coming online and have not really had a chance to.
Okay, I know you indicated the other night you have a new restaurant that's just opening.
Yes, and they have primarily street parking. They do have spaces in the back that are allocated to them. But because of their district, they actually aren't allowed to have rooftop dining or outside music.
Okay.
They're B1 versus
Okay.
most of the restaurants fall in
Okay.
other B categories.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
I'll second your motion for unfavorable recommendation. I share your comments.
All in favor, unfavorable recommendation for amendment number 3?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so that becomes an unfavorable recommendation.
Okay.
I'd like to move amendment 4.
Second?
And this one I think is more of a correction, I think, clarification. I don't think it really changes the content too much.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Alderman Savage?
So I think this is more of a correction. I don't think it really changes
Oh,
the,
okay.
the content or intention. Unless somebody else has more information.
Yeah, I think it was just a text
Did Alderman Tierney provide any input?
No, but legislative aid is, I think, indicating that's the correct assumption.
Cynthia Reuter, Legislative Policy Analyst, Office of Law. You are correct. It just fixes a typo.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Right, I move we give a favorable recommendation to amendment 4.
So moved. Oh, I'm sorry, you moved second. We don't move it. but-
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Favorable.
Move amendment 5.
That looks just like a correction as well.
Yeah.
Typo. Mhm.
Right.
Was that a
Motion.
second?
Second.
Was that a second? Like to move favorable recommendation on amendment 5?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And then I'll move for discussion, amendment 6, which is
Second.
the Arnett amendment. I don't know if anybody else has more information on this. I'm kind of inclined to not take action, or at least to make that motion to take no action.
Well, if we're not, it's changing. Oh, no.
It seems like it adds the commercial office and commercial design overlay to make it a 50%, only a 50% requirement on the office and commercial design overlay districts. So they would not be able to qualify for 100%. But the rest of the legislation doesn't really address commercial design and overlay. I think that's kind of a whole other conversation. personally. I think because tried to focus, I think, on restaurants for, I'm not opposed to adjusting commercial, but
Yeah. Ms. Ruder, do you have any comment on that or further information?
Yes, one moment. I accidentally closed the document.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think the intention of this was to reduce the impacted areas, I think, of the legislation. So it only impacts this office and commercial design overlay, which I'm personally not familiar with, but presumably it's just limited to parts of Eastport and.
Yeah, the commercial design overlay district just happens to be a district that covers Eastport. And so this would let restaurants in Eastport, it would restrict restaurants in Eastport to use only half of the required parking spaces.
So they'd be capped at 50%.
It would be capped at 50%, and the rest of the city would be 100%.
I'm indifferent on that.
What'd you say?
I don't know, I'm indifferent on that. I don't know enough about the
Is that an
differences.
official recommendation, indifference?
Yeah, I think I'd like to ask for, I prefer no action, and maybe we could put it in the record that we'd like to get a copy of the map that shows that overlay, so we can discuss it when it comes before the entire council.
So that's a motion for no action?
Yeah.
Is there
or
a second?
Second?
To show this.
All in
particular-
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Requesting the overlay map.
And then I'd like to move the last one, which is,
I can't bring yours up, Alderman Savage. I don't know why.
there's an error, we just had a bit of a posting error.
So it's not me. Okay, thank you.
Amendment number 7, so I'd like to move amendment 7.
So moved?
And may I
Second.
explain this?
Yes, sir.
This one sticks with the 100% waiver, but it does put a couple of conditions on that. So basically, it would be a automatic waiver of parking if they want it. If the facility requesting the waiver is within 0.25 miles of a structured parking facility. So if they're, my thinking was if they're near a parking garage, it doesn't really matter if they lose all their own off-street parking because people can just park at this facility and walk. And then number 2 would also allow 100% waiver if, again, automatic, if they have an arrangement with another property for shared parking. And again, it'd have to be shared parking within that 0.25 miles. And again, the intention with that is similar, like if they have an arrangement with a church or another parking lot from another facility where their customers and their employees could park, then again, they have no reason, no need to have off-street parking in that situation. Number 3 says that if a facility does receive a waiver, they have to dedicate their former site egress, if present, and the former adjacent on-street parking for a mobility drop-off area for, basically for seniors, other visitors, anybody who's utilizing the mobility transit hubs, including an area for bicycles, scooters to be parked. Yet, so my intention with that would be, if somebody gets a waiver, they're not going to have any off-street parking, but this would at least allow the area in front of the facility to be used for drop-off or pickup by the city's microtransit buses, or for people just to park their scooters, that kind of thing. So that, again, kind of an interest for my ward, seniors in my ward, so they'll be able to take those mobility options and just still gain access if they have problems walking. Number 4 says if a facility cannot comply with number 1 or number 2, that, so in that case, if they're not near a facility and they can't get close enough to shared parking, that they could still potentially receive the 100% waiver, but they'd have to pay increased fees so be increased by 100%, so the fees would be 200%. And again, my thinking with that is if that money will go towards potentially building that structure, mobility center, something nearby that they could utilize money to go towards improving our mobility options. But it also states that they would, if they do utilize this, they'd have to advertise these non-automobile alternatives on their menus and tables so people know that there are these, and they're encouraging people to use these alternatives. So that's my proposal.
Do you have questions about that?
No questions?
Do we want to move for a favorable recommendation on Amendment 7?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So we'll give that a favorable recommendation. So do we have a motion to give favorable recommendation for 04922 to the council
As amended?
as amended?
Second? Or so moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right, favorable recommendation. is had. Are there any other questions? Comments?
No.
I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.